Alright, so here I am making the first video in the keezer build series, and we're talking about the collar. So this wooden piece that's kind of situated in here, where the top of the chest freezer sits, and it mates to the body of your chest freezer. So number one, when you're making the collar, you'll see obviously I've got holes for my taps drilled here. You want to drill all those in the front piece beforehand. So take your measurements, know how big it needs to be, and in the front piece drill your holes for the tabs. Also cut your hole for the temperature control, which we'll talk about in a subsequent video, because that's the wiring of this whole thing is going to be a video all unto itself. But make sure that you have the temperature control, and I'll send you a link for this one that I'm using. It's an Inkbird temperature control, and I'll take you through how to rewire this whole thing. But cut a hole for that and drill your holes for your taps. Beforehand in this piece. But once you've got it measured out for the size of the keezer, you can go ahead and do those cuts and those holes. But you have to decide how tall it's going to be. And the way you decide that, we can go around back here. I've scooted my keezer out away from the wall, so hopefully we can see here. Excuse my finger. So you have hinges that open and close the lid. And each hinge is going to have a bottom screw and a top screw. So what you want to do is take a look at those screw holes, and you can see where the old screw holes were for the bottom. You've got to determine what the height of that is. And then what I did was I made my top holes the holes for the bottom of the hinge, and determined how high my collar had to be to accommodate that hinge. So this is a 2x6 collar on this model of fridge. It may be different on yours, or freezer, excuse me. It may be different, but you'll have to determine how high that collar should be. And once you've done that, then you can go about making your measurements, putting the collar together, and then you don't want to screw it down into the body of the freezer. You want to use a sealant to stick it down, and this is what I use. This 3M Marine adhesive sealant worked really well. So I built my, I figured out how tall my collar would be. I took my measurements. I just used a 2x6. You can use any material. You could use something much nicer if you have a nicer chest freezer, and make it more presentable. I just went for a ratchety basement build. But take your measurements, determine how tall it's going to be. Get some kind of adhesive sealant. Assemble the collar. Make sure that you drill your holes and cut your holes for the front beforehand, because it's a lot easier. And then apply your adhesive on the lip of the bottom part of your freezer. Drop this down on the collar. Once you've assembled it, drop it down on so it sticks. Put the lid on, put a bunch of weight on it. I had buckets that were full of old spackling, sand, any kind of weighted thing I could put on top of this. I put it on top, and it'll just help it kind of set properly to accommodate you know, sit on the lip of the freezer right, accommodate the lid properly, and you just leave it there for like 48 hours, and then you're stuck down. Whatever the instructions on the sealant say. I think mine said 48 hours, so I left it there for 48 hours. Whatever kind of sealant you use, just follow the instructions. And then once you're all stuck down, you know, you've already got your holes drilled because you've done that beforehand. I can't emphasize that enough. Then you kind of move on to subsequent stages, and I'll make videos for that stuff and post them in the chat here as we go along. But I just wanted to make the first one and get you thinking about it. If you have questions, let me know. Clearly, I have been drinking. And this is a ratchety YouTube video that will never be released to YouTube. Let's go! Keezer collar.